All right, this is EvoToca. This podcast is for coaches all around America, especially to get some advice from other coaches with different perspectives. And today I have Coach Danny. I've known Coach Danny since I was probably born. But Coach Danny has been coaching. How many years have you been coaching?
For a while. Since I was probably
decades,
late 20s, and I'm 50.
Yeah,
almost 53.
Yeah. And
late 20s to now.
What's that?
My late 20s.
Okay. And the reason I brought Coach Danny on is because, first off, he's played at a level as high as you can play in Germany, and it's not just he's not just someone who knows the game from a player perspective, because he's coached as well. And I know that he coached the 92s, and I believe at one point they were like second or third in the nation, if I'm not mistaken.
Same year that we all won state.
Exactly. And this was a team that was coached with the core players. So you were not one of those coaches that said, okay, we're 13, 14, I'm going to cut the players and then get a new set of players. You know what I mean? You had gotten the 92s at what age?
Your dad was coaching them the first year, so I took over from U12.
U12 all the way to U18. Yeah. I know at U12 they were definitely not one of the top teams. The 92s. They were getting there. Yeah. But not. I just mean relative to where they ended up being.
Where we ended up being.
Yeah. So, Coach Denny, the first question I have is, what sparked your interest in the game of soccer?
Well, I grew up in West Africa. I grew up in Ghana. And, just by God's providence, I literally lived across the street from the second biggest stadium in our country with probably the best team in Africa at that time.
Okay.
Which is Asante Kotoko. They played literally right across the street from my neighborhood. And then so all the kids in our neighborhood, that's all we wanted to do was play soccer. And then also growing up, my dad wasn't there, but my dad had played previously in Ghana and before he immigrated to the States. And then so soccer is just, not just in the blood, but in the neighborhood where I grew up.
And it's funny. It's funny you say that. I'm just thinking about how we can instill that within kids in America, like just being across. Because I've heard kids in Europe talking about, I went to this first team game at the highest level, or I went to the stadium, and I just wonder how much that would help. I mean, obviously, I know we're not at the same level as those other teams, but I just wonder how much of a difference that makes in terms of your interest. And you had said it was like a neighborhood thing.
Yep.
Right.
Yep. So for us, it was, I grew up in a place like your dad where soccer was just a part of the culture, right? It's a lot different when soccer is a part of your culture. Like, I've lived in America for a while, and, American football is a part of the culture, basketball is a part of the culture. Like, so, sometimes, every once in a while I do an experiment. I come to training, and then if you give the boys an American football and tell them to divide themselves, right? They're able to pick who's going to be the quarterback, who's going to be the center, who's going to be your wide receiver. They just know that because that's part of their culture.
Yeah.
Right? And soccer for many people around the world is kind of like that, to where everybody will say everybody played soccer at one point or another. It was something that everybody did.
I see.
And then for me, so that's the biggest difference in the States. Even though I've been here for a long time, even, one of my best friends, Keith Williams, great player, right? But soccer was not part of his culture. He just played soccer. He didn't, live and breathe soccer, but he's an awesome soccer, he was an awesome soccer player, even better coach. And, but I think if, I look forward to the day where soccer becomes part of the fabric,
Yeah.
Go ahead.
No, it's good on you. I never thought about that, because even with my 6 and 7 year olds, they know they know football.
They know the rules. They know the rules of basketball.
They know players, teams. So, but if you go to a football team or a basketball team, you tell them, divide yourself into a soccer team, they'd be like, They probably won't. They know. Yeah.
They'll look at you
that
funny.
Is interesting.
You say, let's play 5-a-side, right? They wouldn't know. Okay, so if you're playing 5-a-side, how do we play?
Yeah.
We play with 2 in the back, 2 across. They wouldn't know that.
That's interesting.
Conversely, if my players, my soccer players, if I give them a basketball, because sometimes we train on the basketball court. The first thing they do, this is how you know. The first thing they do when they come in the gym, pick up a basketball and start shooting. They do that more than anything, It is but that's part of their culture,
Man,
it's
that's
really
true.
It's a cultural thing more than anything.
It's funny. It's funny. I was about to ask you, what do you mean by culture? But I never heard of that perspective before.
Yeah.
That's interesting. And this may be the same answer, but what made you fall in love with the game?
Man, I'm telling you, Kevin, where I grew up, right? Literally the biggest team, one of the biggest teams in Africa. I grew up in the 70s in Ghana, right? One of the biggest teams in all of Africa. One of the 2 big teams in Ghana was literally right across the street from me, right? And so everybody in our city, that was our team. Literally to the point to where me and your dad would, we would joke that if we lost, I think they played on Saturdays when I was a kid, right? People would not eat the next day or that evening, right? People would, because it was just a part of it was ingrained in us, And so all the kids in the neighborhood, just like here, I came here when I was younger. Everybody in Dallas is a Dallas Cowboy fan. And everybody, and as you kind of multiply that by tens when you come to a place like Ghana with soccer, and especially my city with my team. So, to this day is my favorite team. My sons will ask me, I'm a big Arsenal fan, and but they know my team is Asante Kotoko, and that's just the team that's in my heart, and it's just from the youngest age. And I think that goes to shape that culture of soccer, right? When you grow up in a place like that, right? Soccer becomes a part of you. So all the kids in our neighborhood, everybody wanted to play. That's what everybody wanted to do, There was really no other sport that we wanted to play. We either just ran. I think we played table tennis with boards or whatever, but we didn't even have any soccer balls, but we would just put, any rag together. And every kid in my neighborhood was just wanted to play. I remember, back home, I would get in trouble because I'd be out playing all day. And I would come home and I would always get spankings for just being gone all day. And all I did was just play. So those are the things that led to my love for the game to even to this day.
Man, I wish I could relate to that, but we don't have that here.
No, but it's coming, man. Little by little, that when we go to training now, all the kids, they speak. A lot of the kids are starting to talk about the games they watch over the weekend. The kids have teams. They have their teams. They have an affection for. And I always tell other coaches and people when I have conversations with them, I was I think their kids are gonna, because they're gonna fall in love with the game. And then their kids. So hopefully in the next second, third generations, then you're going to have somebody that's come through 2 generations of soccer.
Okay.
Of people that actually played. Because, when you were growing up, most of the parents had never played soccer.
Correct. Yeah.
Most of the kids that play with you, that was, especially the American kids. Most of their parents had never played soccer.
Yeah.
This was their first son playing soccer, right? Or their daughter playing soccer. So I look at you and Emmett, and Kyle and, Danny and all those guys. Imagine when your kids, right? So you have a generation of you played and you coach, and then you're going to have a son or daughter that plays. And then imagine that next generation after that, right?
Yeah.
Now you have a generation of love for the game.
Correct. Yeah. When my kid, or when I have a kid, the kids that are playing now, they'll have kids, or the parents that are around my age now, they'll have kids, but a lot of them will have played soccer.
Exactly.
For most likely many years, but they'll have a better idea. And I wanted to ask you too, now that I think about it, because you're a player with flair, where did that come from? That's what I'm curious about that.
It's I don't know. It has to do with just the love for the game. But honestly, man, I really think that, it's just something, players is something that's in the player.
It's
right?
a natural tendency.
It's a thing that's in us, right? Because like even think about the kids you played with, right? Like all the people I played with, they all had different strengths.
Correct. Yeah, that's true.
I love the ball. I love dribbling. And they just like, even to this day, as an old man, when I get to play neutral with my kids, when I get the ball, I can still feel that joy of serving the ball one way or the other, or turning a certain way, or putting the ball through somebody's leg a certain way. It just is part of soccer that made me fall in love with the game, if you would.
So it's probably more of like just something that naturally draws certain people, just off of the way, not necessarily that they're taught, necessarily, but
here, I'll give you a good example, right? I coach your brother. Your younger brother played for me, right? You and Sean are completely different players, right? You are more flair, right, than Sean is, right? You just play completely different. So even though you both came through the same academy, the same system, right, and similar coaches, right, the way you play was completely different from the way Sean played. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, of course.
Right?
Yeah.
So like technical ability is just like, like we were talking earlier about different players and whatnot. You just have players that are like, just, I want to use the word born with it, but basically that's what it is. Most people understand when you say born with it, but your abilities are, for me, are in you. And my job as a coach is I need to remove everything that's not your ability. Right?
Remove everything that's not your ability.
Yes.
What's an example of that?
Okay. So for example, it's like, okay, so, when you train kids, you see some kids that are really, really good in taking people on.
Correct.
Right?
Yeah.
Then you see some kids that are really, really aggressive in defending.
Correct. Yeah.
They have an affinity towards and it's just part of them.
Yeah.
Right?
They're just good natural tacklers.
Exactly.
For whatever reason.
So as you're coaching, as you're setting up, when you go to a game, because you have younger players, right? When you're setting them up, right? In your mind, you're going to be like, oh, Johnny is, he's very tenacious. So where is he going to play? In the back. Yeah. Right? And then you see this other kid, you're like, Dario is he likes to take people on, right? You're not going to put him in goal. Where are you going to put him? You're going to put him in the midfield.
Correct.
Right?
Correct.
And then you have a kid at practice that just like, man, he just loves to shoot. Every time the ball comes to him, he's just hitting, right? And then so those are the kids that will gravitate towards playing up top.
Yeah.
Right? So out of the group of players that, that you have, as you're coaching them, you see their abilities they have. And your job is, even though so when I train, we go through the same technical stuff for everybody, but not all the kids are going to pick it up the same way.
Correct.
The dribblers are going to pick it up a certain way, right? Yeah. And your more tenacious defenders are going to pick it up a certain way. Yeah. And your strikers are going to pick it up a certain way. Yeah. So as they mature, then, I believe our job as coaches is then you kind of point them towards where their strengths are. And
it's funny that you say that when I'm thinking of like my 9 and 10-year-olds, like my 2 center mids. So I emphasize the same things for them, but naturally one is more attacking, one is more defensive. Exactly. One looks to pass more, the other looks to dribble more. Yep. But I didn't teach them, hey, you dribble more. They just did it naturally. Yep. And these next questions are on your philosophy of coaching. And can you describe your philosophy of coaching, like how you go about coaching? What type of things do you think are important when you're coaching a team?
Excellent. From all the years when we used to coach you guys, I think about the game differently than I do, back then. And so we as coaches, we learn, we progress, right? So for me, it's really important that, like a lot of times, because we coach younger players, some parents would be like, well, my son is really good at, my son is this when they come to my team. My son is a forward or my son is a defender or whatever. For me, I think my job is technically, right? My job is to put in, for my players, this is what's important to me. When the ball comes to you, right? Can you control the ball? Right? It sounds really basic, right? But control is in degrees. When you look at the highest level players, when Zidane controls the ball stops like that. When Marcelo controls the ball stops, right? Yeah. And when you have Ivan Campo, right? He controls the ball. It takes him longer to control the ball, even though he is superb. But there are degrees of control, right? Correct. So I believe my job as a coach is we will do training exercises to help each individual get better with their training, right? And then we will do dribbling to help each player with their dribbling, right? And then, so I do that. So for me, when we get to a game, if you can play as a right back, you should be able to play as a right mid, because the only difference is a 15-yard, you know, you're 15 yards ahead or 15 yards behind. And the way I look at the game, when the ball comes to you, Kevin, you do the same thing. You have to be able to control the ball, right? And the quicker you can control the ball, it gives you more time to do what? To look up. Then you make the decision of whether you run with the ball or you play with the ball. Because the way I look at the game, when you get the ball, you're trying to find each other to go to goal, right? And ultimately, the goal is one of your teammates, the way I look at the game, right? So usually when we do training, we have small-sided goals, right? So imagine you're doing a small-sided game. I don't use one goal. I use multiple goals here, multiple goals here, right? So this team is attacking here. And let's say if you play 5 versus 5, right? You have two small goals. This one team is attacking that goal. So I tell the kids, okay, when you look at it for the uninitiated, it's 5 versus 5, right? But in truly, when you have possession of the ball, it is 7 versus 5. Because these guys
those are like teammates.
Your teammates.
I see.
Right?
I see.
And so my philosophy of playing the ball is, your job is how do we move the ball, moving the other team from side to side for them to vacate the goal so we can score, right? But I try to use the word scoring out of their vocabulary at a young age because once they think about that as a goal, they're just going to shoot.
Yeah, correct.
As opposed to just, because most of the time when you just hit the ball, it doesn't go in. You have to place it.
Correct.
Right?
Yeah.
So when, my philosophy of coaching is, when they look at those goals as the extension of their team, right? And then now the goal is, how do we move this team that's defending this goal, these two goals,
to make to
make them move away? So we pass the ball,
that makes sense,
to move the other team, right?
So that your teammate, the goal is open.
Is open. So how do we get our teammates to get open, right?
Yeah.
We play the ball. So for example, like we had a training session on Friday. It was a skill session I was doing. My topic was passing. And I asked the kids, okay, who can tell me why do we pass the ball, right? They're like, oh, because one of them, they're really smart kids. They're like, because it's a team sport and you want to use each other. And I was like, okay, that's great. And then they came up with these other things. But I was like, okay, those things are good, right? But let's see if we can look at a bigger picture, right? And I set up an example. It was like, I had the ball. The guy was defending me. I had an open teammate over there, right? And then so I was like, so I asked all the kids, I have the ball. I can take him on and I can beat him because I'm bigger and I'm faster. I'm technically better than him, right? But the only reason is because I'm bigger and faster than him. I can beat him because I'm bigger and faster. What if he's just as big as me, right? Then beating him is not quite as easy. So how do I get rid of this defender that's defending me? Kevin, if you're my teammate over there, if I play you the ball, what is his normal tendency?
Just go right to me. Yeah.
So the only reason I'm giving you the ball is so that he will do what?
Move away from you. Yeah.
And then the second part is, once our understanding is the same, that Coach Haney is giving me the ball, so this guy will come. So I just need to give the ball back to Coach Haney.
Correct.
And when I get the ball, I have a window.
Correct.
Before this guy
you have a
back.
window. Yeah.
Right? So the longer you hold the ball, the more time it gives him to come. Right? But if I send them to you and then you give it back to me, now I can run forward with the ball without opposition. Something I learned as I gotten older is like, when you're young, you like to dribble. It's fun taking on people, right? But as a coach, you see the game completely different.
Even with me. Yeah.
Like when you guys were playing. And then so, I tell the kids now, like, as opposed to taking on somebody one-on-one like this, you actually want to go into the space.
Yeah.
So when they go, and then you change directions. So every time they come, what are you doing? That's how dribbling is.
Yeah.
You're just changing directions. But the picture we have of dribbling, because if you watch highlights on ESPN or something, the only thing they're going to show you is the 1 or 2 times where you physically had to take on a player, because there was no other play, there was nobody to be used for when you're taking the person on. So just learning that, right, is really, really changed my understanding of the game, and hopefully that translate to my players.
Yes.
That they see the game completely different.
I see. Man, that's interesting. And whenever you're coaching the team, what are the top goals that you have for them by the time they're 18 years old?
Man, my heart for my players is like, when they all start, you have kids that are really athletic or not athletic, right? I want them as they progress in the game and ultimately get to like 18, 19 is like technically they're really good, right? And what I mean by technically they're good, I'm not talking about getting the ball and, taking somebody out. No, just when the ball comes to you, for example, I tell the parents like, okay, this is the homework for my parents. When we go to a game, I want you to take a piece of paper and record how many times the ball goes to your kid, right? So let's say on an average, the ball comes to your kid 20 times a game, right? Out of that 20 times, how many times was he able to control the ball, right? And how many times did he not control the ball? I want you to take tally marks, right? And then, the parent might be like, well, this week, it was 50-50. It was, 20 balls came. He got 10 and he didn't. And so I tell the parents how you tell what I want. The goal for my kids is like every week we should go from 10 to 20, right? There's going to be some weeks where you're 15, 16. There's going to be some weeks where you're 8 and 9 because the speed of the game and the pressure of the game. So for my goal for my players is as they get older, by the time you're 18, let's say you have the ability to become a professional player. If you notice when you went to Germany, the difference is the speed of play, right?
Yeah.
The difference, technically, there's not that much difference in players.
Even physically.
Yeah.
Like Americans are physical.
Physical.
Yeah.
Right? The biggest difference in, Bundesliga 1, Bundesliga 2 is not so much the technical ability, right? But it's like how much time you have on the ball. So for me as a coach, I think whether you're a defender, even my goalkeeper, my midfielders or attackers, right? How many times out of 20, and I use 20 as a number, right? When you receive the ball in the game, your heart is beating. Are you able to control the ball, right? Because if you can control the ball, Kevin, my philosophy for you, my goal for you is like, if, when you control the ball, it gives you time to what? To look up. And in the game, that's what you don't have time for. Because I also learned that, when soccer is played on instinct. If you have to think about what you're going to do, it's too late, right? So instinctively, when the ball comes to you, Kevin, when you're playing, did you go like, oh, you just control without even thinking about it, right? And the difference between you and most of the players you played with is you were able to control the ball like that. Once you're able to control the ball instantly,
100%,
then you're ready to play.
And a lot of that, at least for me, was just repetition. Just going out, hitting the ball against the wall, controlling it to the ball. You don't even think about it. Now you got so much time because the ball stops dead. You don't even think about it.
You don't think about it.
Yeah.
You don't think about it.
I see.
Yeah.
And what are I know this question, but what are the age group of teams that you have coached, like from the youngest to the oldest?
So obviously, I coach. The youngest we have now is the 4v4. So the 4v4s are U7s? U7s? U7s and U8s? Or is it U6 and U7s?
U8s, I think is 4v4 too.
Yeah, 4v4.
Well, no, U8s, you can decide if you want to go to 4v4, 7v7.
Yeah. So for me, I think it's really important, to do 4v4, to go through, excuse me, to go through the sequence, right? Because the decisions you have to make in 4v4 are completely different from the decisions you have to make in 7v7, right? There's less people, and the more people you have, the more complicated the game gets, right? So, I've coached from the 4v4 all the way to like semi-pros, kids that are like in their late teens and early 20s. And then so doing that, you get a range of, ability. But for me, the irony is like, I still, in the big picture, you're still teaching them all the same thing, right? Because the difference when you are a semi-pro is your ability to control the ball quickly, right? Your ability to make decisions. And it's the same way as 4v4, right? Even though 4v4 is chaotic and the kids are just kind of running everywhere, the better players are the ones who are able to control the ball. When I say control the ball is when you're running, the ball is still with you.
Correct.
As opposed to just kicking the ball away and then running after the ball, right? And then so for me, coaching all ages is really important that technically, when I use the word technically, that you're really, really good with the ball. Right? Because once, I tell people dribbling is not hard. What is hard for most players is they can't get the ball under control before the defenders come. And if you can't do that, then you're not going to have time to look to see where they're coming from and then to run in the opposite directions or to bypass them. The more time you have, then the easier it is to take on people or to make it, to find your teammate.
Yeah.
So those who have time, like you remember when Zidane was playing, it seems like he just has all day, right? And because
even under pressure, yeah,
that's the difference. So for me, the better you are under pressure, the better player you're going to be. And that's my goal, is to get you, every year you play with me, that you're getting better and better and better under pressure.
Okay. And okay. So this was actually going to be on the next question, but what are the differences that you focus on for each age group? But you kind of said, did you kind of say it's kind of like they're working on the same thing?
They are. And I think our jobs as coaches, it's like, then you have to find exercises for the U7s that are going to get the same thing as for the U19s. So my passing or whatever we're working on, right, is going to be more complicated for the older players than it is for the younger players, right? So if you're doing like some, passing sequence, right, with the younger kids is going to be a lot simpler, right? With the older players, you're still working on passing sequences, right? Or moving the ball sequences, but the complications are going to be a lot more for these guys because they're a lot more mature than these guys. But nonetheless, we're working on the same thing.
And that goes for dribbling, everything. And is there a difference in terms of like, let's say a session is an hour and a half? Is there a difference in terms of how much you work on one thing versus the other at certain age groups, or is it also, again, the same, but it's just simpler?
For me, for the most part, I try not, a lot of coaches, when you go to coaching courses and stuff, you're working on what didn't work in the game for your kids to get better, right?
Yeah.
But I find that the level of the kids that I have, right, they need certain technical requirements to be a good soccer player. So every day, that's my focus for the whole year. Not the same exercises, but we're working on, once again, you go back to like how comfortable you are with the ball, right? For me, as a soccer player, the more comfortable you are with the ball, the better you are as a player, because then soccer is a game of making decisions, right? So the whole year we'll work on how do we get you comfortable with the ball, right? And then my goal is, how do I make it interesting for the kids with the different exercises you do, because you have them for a whole soccer calendar, right? For a whole year. And then in addition to, obviously, once you start having league matches, you will work on stuff that your team was not good at in the game, right? If you guys are struggling with something, you will come to training and work on those things so they will get better. Like, let's say you can't get the ball out of the back, right? So in training, you work on how do we get the ball out of the back, right? But think about it, Kevin. Getting the ball out of the back, right? It's all dependent on, okay, so let's say we're playing out of the back. You got your two center backs, you got your outside backs, right? If you play to the center back and he's not comfortable with the ball, how successful is your team going to be in getting the ball out?
You're not going to be successful.
So his problem is not playing out of the back.
It's comfortable. How comfortable he is with the ball.
He's not good with the ball.
Man, I see. Yeah. Man, and it's funny that you say that, because two things on what you said, and sometimes I struggle with this too. Just the other day, but I kind of put everything into perspective. Is you see, like everything is good or it looks good, and then one game is like, wait, what happened? Do I need to go back and do this again? But the other thing too, about what you said is. And I remember a coach from France saying it, is that the problem with a lot of coaches is that they say they're going to work on something, but as soon as something else comes up in a game, they switch everything they did and they forget what they were working on. They don't give the team enough time to develop that, and then they say that, oh, this doesn't work. Because you're so caught up, like you said, from game to game, you're like, oh, we did bad on this, I got to work on this, instead of like staying with the program the whole time. But that can be difficult.
Yeah. No, I think there's obviously, as you're saying, that there's a place for that, right? But for me, as I've gotten older in coaching, And I start realizing like the fundamental problem is still the same thing, right? You're not able to do certain things in the game is because you're just not good with the ball.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. And when you're good with the ball, right? Think about a team that presses you. You know, like our Aces team.
Yeah.
You know, we used to play these Texans and whatnot and Solar. They would always put pressure on us and we would lose the ball. Right? What was the problem? Was the problem them putting pressure on us, or were we just not? Some of our players were not good with the ball.
Yeah.
So what did we focus on? If you're good with the ball, there's a word that they use now. You're press resistant. Right?
Okay.
So if your defenders are really comfortable, you have PK and those guys, you know, John Stones on the ball, you know, Saliba, those guys are good with the ball. And now when you put pressure on them, it doesn't matter.
And then you stop putting pressure because it's like, what's the point?
Exactly. You know, so for me, your job, you know, as a coach, you cannot move away from that because once your players start getting comfortable with the ball, then how you play is just a tactical thing. That's just something that you just have to learn. Like you literally sit there with a blackboard and show your kids like, okay, this is what we want to do. This is how we want to play. That part is not hard. What's hard is when they get the ball, it's taking them 3 minutes to control the ball when it should take them, you know, a millisecond. Does that make sense?
You know what's funny? I wonder why, or maybe that's why, because that does require patience though. Because you think, oh, I need the quick fix. But the comfortability with the ball takes time. And I was going to say that I wonder if that's why coaches spend so much time working on like other tactical things that have nothing to do with the ball, because they're like, okay, I want the results now. Let's get the quick fix and work on, like, for example, I on what you said, I have parents where, or maybe one or two, where that same question you had about, oh, why don't we play this formation or that? So, because like we were pressuring a team up the field, like in their own half, and then we're losing balls, like while we're dribbling or passing, and then the other team has an open goal, and he's like, "Why don't we just put some players back so they can't score on this?" But in actuality, at least for my team, if they were better on the ball, then those things would happen far less.
That's how you play.
Yeah.
Because the better you are with the ball, you know, I always use this adage. It says, no matter how good the team is, if they don't have the ball, Kevin, they can't win. They can't score.
Correct.
Right? So I want my team to be really, really good with the ball. Right? Because once we get good at the ball, and then now we start thinking about, okay, how do we move them out of the way?
Yeah.
But in my experience of coaching, the biggest problem is always like, are my kids good enough with the ball? Right? And once you get your kids good enough with the ball, teams can put pressure on you as much as they like. Right?
Yeah.
You have the ball.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And it doesn't mean, you know, having the ball doesn't mean you're always going to win or you're always going to score. Right? But the other team is going to score a lot less.
Correct.
If they don't have the ball, they can't score. And I think, you know, coaching, especially youth level, and your first question was, you know, how do we get soccer better? You know, I mean, that's, you know, your goal is, for me, until the kids get better with the ball, right? So coaches, especially the youth level, right? I think your job is to really, really help your kids to be comfortable with the ball. Because the more comfortable they are with the ball, then you're going to see what they can do in the game. Right? And I think, so for me, that's probably the number one thing is how do we get, you know, the young players we coach, your job is to help them get better. But unfortunately, we live in a culture where everything is winning, right? So if no matter how good your kids are with the ball, if you're losing every weekend, at the end of the year, you're going to lose all your players, all your better players. They're going to tell you, we've had this conversation, you know, me and your dad, and they're like, well, you know, we're just going to go to this team because they win. And then you know that you completely played the other team off the park. And then they got like 2 fluky goals or something, right? And then, but the parents, because they are not from a soccer culture, right? They don't really see what is a good player and what is not a good player. They really don't. Right? They see their metric of measuring is who won.
That is good team who wins more.
And you know, it's not such, you know, I don't say that, you know, as you know, nothing against parents, but for them, that's what they know. It's like if your team wins, then you have a good team.
Yeah.
Right? And you can just go and tell your defenders, hey, every time the ball comes, just send it over. Right? And, and just put, get a kid that's fast up top, send the ball over, you win some games.
Man.
Most parents will go home like, hey, our team is good. You're sitting there going, man, we can't even put 2 or 3 passes.
Man, that's so true. Like, just looking at my and this is back to because you got to be patient, because like you said, you want to win. And if you want to do things the right way, man, you got to be patient. Like with my team, on what you just said, we give up goals because we're playing out the back. I don't want my players to just kick it away. If they have space, they need to go dribble the ball. Don't just kick it away and you have time and space, but or you feel panic. But that's such a good. But the hard part is just like you said, you lose players because you're not winning games. Yeah, man, that's a tough one.
I think I learned a lot from your dad in that instance. It's like, he has a philosophy of, I'm sure he still does it, talking to his team and his parents after every game, right? I think that helps a lot, because then you are not only coaching the kids, right? You're also educating your parents as well, right? And a lot of times, you're going to have 1 or 2 parents is like, oh, why are you always washing over us losing? But I think if you can, you can paint a picture for your parents, what you want them to see, right? Then you're going to have parents that, be like, man, I see what this coach is trying to do, right? And I can literally see that my son is better in the last 3 months than he was 3 months
That's what you got to look at. That's what you got to look at. And I think that would be, I know that would be so much better, because like you said, the metric is winning. But if you can say, hey, where was my kid 3 or 6 months ago? And that'll help me know if he's actually developing or not.
Actually getting better. I think we need most player models, right? Player development models, but it coincides with like educating the parents, because most parents, most of them, this is their first kids playing. Even now, this is their first kids playing, right? And they never played soccer themselves, right? And what I've learned is I talk to parents and I'll ask them, what sport did you play? Right. And once they tell me, and, a lot of times the sport they played, I can play it a little bit. Right. So I'm able to convey or to paint a picture for them using the sport that they play. If they'll call me and ask me like, hey, can you tell us something about your kind of your team philosophy and whatnot, and then so as I'm talking to parents, what helps is if I can find what sport they play, right? They say like, oh, we played basketball. And I go, okay, how would it work if your point guard, right, couldn't dribble up the court? When he was dribbling, he would lose the ball every time, right? How are you going to play basketball when your point guard can't bring the ball up the court, right? So he has to be good with the ball. So then I'll paint a picture for him. Is like, hey, that's what I'm trying to do with your son, right? Your son, what he struggles with is like, he can't dribble up the court without losing the ball or without double dribbling, right? Or without traveling. And then, so if we as coaches, I think how we can help is if we can, it's important to educate the parents, right?
Right. Yeah.
And if you can get the parents to, for lack of a better word, buy in to what you're doing, then I think it's a lot easier to retain our better players.
100%.
And to progress, and to help the kids get better year after year. And to eventually when we get to a point, my goal is by the time the kids are like 15, 16, that I'm not having to spend so much time on technical stuff, right? That they should already know at that point. Then we can look up to see, okay, now how do we move the ball, right? Where are you supposed to be when we have the ball? The tactical aspects of the game. For me, that shouldn't come until your kids are proficient with the
Makes
ball,
a lot of sense.
irrespective of their age.
Makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Irrespective of their age, yes.
It doesn't matter. You can have a U17 team. If they can't control and pass the ball and run with the ball without tripping over it, then what are you going to, tactically, what are you going to tell them?
You can't do anything.
You can't do anything.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that's really, our job as youth coaches, especially, at the professional level. Obviously, you don't have all those guys, as we talked before, Kevin, all those guys that, that play as a professional, they can play, whether they're playing the USL or they're playing the MLS, right? They can control the ball, but the thing is, they're how good are they at controlling the ball, right?
The grades you talked
Degrees,
about. Degrees.
Degrees.
Yeah.
Yep, that's the separation in players. You know, so I think it's important from my philosophy of coaching is I need the kids to get better, more comfortable on the ball. Right?
Yeah.
Once you're comfortable on the ball, then for me soccer is easy. It's just looking up to see, okay, I can't go there, I need to go there. But the thing is, you have to run there. And most people, when they try to run with the ball, what happens to the ball?
It goes away.
The ball goes away.
Yeah.
That's the difference.
Yeah.
That for me is really that black and white. That's the difference in soccer. If you can run with the ball without losing it, you can play. Because that gives you time to look up to see who's open to play 1-2, to switch the point of attack. But everything is based on how good you are with the ball. Right? Like I watched games today, and even at the EPL level, it's still the same thing. There's some players that are a lot more comfortable with the ball than the others. And the ones that are a lot more comfortable with the ball, they're the better players.
Yep, 100%.
Yeah.
100%.
And it's, even at that professional level, you can see the difference.
The degrees.
The degrees.
Yeah. And to sum it up about USU soccer, if you could change one thing about American culture to improve youth soccer in America, what would it be?
Yeah, that's a loaded question.
And it doesn't have to be. It can be coaches. It can just be the culture in general, like you spoke with before. Something to do within the system. And I know, and I can tell you some of the things to jog your ideas a little bit. But some people have said, like in Germany, they have the courts in neighborhoods, all the neighborhoods. So putting more of that. Another one said, some people say the promotion and the relegation system, as opposed to all the leagues that we have. We don't have like one league where the best teams move up, best teams come down. And then I know one thing that you said earlier was when we get to a point where you can go to players who play basketball or football and they're familiar with how soccer is played. That's another one.
Yeah. I think that all of those are ultimately, all of those are part of the solution, right? But I think there's a guy that I follow online. He's an American that moved to Japan, and he sums it up a lot better, than most people do. And, he talks about like soccer begins at home, right? So as you look around, there should be a soccer ball around here somewhere, right? I think the more kids just play at home, right? And for me, it all comes down to how comfortable you are with the ball, right? So as you're running around, you're dribbling and you're getting comfortable with the ball, right? I think that's fundamental. Like it starts at home, right? Where a kid should have a ball that's not going to be breaking stuff to where a mom is going to get all upset, right? But they need to be dribbling like all around the house on their own. This is not something you teach kids. It's just when you live in a culture. One thing I love about like a lot of Mexican Americans is like even the guys that are out working hard, like cutting the lawn or something, whatever, construction, right? If you notice every once in a while, when they get a break, they set up 2 trash cans and they're playing, right? So for me, I think how you fundamentally change soccer, right, has really nothing to do with coaches, because coaches are, a coach, Kevin, you can't teach people to play soccer, right? Soccer is something that is in you, right? And it starts from your house where you're playing, and, along those same lines, kids getting comfortable with the ball in their own home before they even come out to a team, right? But I think the one thing tied into that hurts us is you don't go out to a park and see 10 kids playing by themselves. And that would tie into the courts in Germany or whatever, right? I think what made me fall in love with the game as a kid back home in Ghana is like, it was just the neighborhood kids would just get together, right? And Kevin, we didn't even have a soccer ball, like an actual ball. We just made something.
Now that's culture, right? When you got to go out of your way to make something happen. Like it's not just there for you, but you go out of your way to say, hey, what are we going to do? So,
I think all tied into that is like, sometimes soccer is too organized here. And not just here in the Western world, but the problem is getting the same way in Ghana.
But that's how it is in Brazil, right?
Yeah. It's the same.
They don't have the same players anymore.
They don't. That's a good
They
point.
don't have the same players.
Brazil is not Brazil. Brazil used to be my favorite team to watch, right? Now I can't even stand up and watch them because
Mm.
they don't have the same Brazilian players I grew up watching.
Mm.
The Zicos, Dr. Socrates, all these guys, they're not there anymore because those players came from, people always use the word the streets or whatever, right?
Mm.
There's nothing special about playing out in the streets.
Mm.
I think it's more of a synonym, or it encompasses the free play of kids playing without any coach there telling them, hey, you got to do this.
Yeah.
Right? Like my son loves the ball, right? And I have to catch myself and not to beat that out of him because when he comes to practice and he starts doing stuff, me as a coach, I'm like, hey, dude, that guy was open. He should have played him the ball, right?
Yeah.
I have to tell him that because he's where he's at practice.
Yeah.
But if he was playing with his friends at a park by themselves,
let him, yeah.
That's how you become a player.
Mm-hmm.
Just you and your friends playing.
Yeah.
So when you come to a team, then the team's going to be like, man, this kid has all this thing in him. Now let me take away everything that he doesn't need.
Yeah. Yes. Right? Yes.
Because you can't put the soccer stuff in him. Yes. The soccer stuff has to be in him. Right?
Yeah.
So our job as coaches, I think the problem with us, and I use the word problem all the time, you have to excuse me. The problem is like in America or now, coaching is like your job. We think our job is to really make these players, right?
Yeah.
Kevin, you can't make
as opposed to just giving an environment where they can do what they need to do.
Where they can try.
So it's really about providing an environment, not about, hey, you need to do this and this.
Because once you start doing that, right, then you're limiting the players. So no matter how good you are, how good I am, how good your dad is, how good all these coaches are, all that we're doing is making players after ourselves. As opposed to, okay, Kevin has these talents, right? How do we put him in an environment where he can become the player, the potential that's there, right?
Yeah.
When things get organized,
you don't get Ronaldinho's.
You don't get those.
You don't get those 70 Brazilian players.
You don't get those anymore.
Where every single player on the field on the 1970 Brazil team can take you on.
Exactly.
You got the left back
from Carlos Alberto all the way to Pelé.
It's unbelievable. Yeah,
right?
yeah.
To Costal, right?
Yeah.
If you watch Brazil now, they don't have those guys anymore. And I don't even like watching Brazil anymore.
You'll be lucky to find one.
They're just not the same team, right?
Yeah.
So even Brazil is being infected by everything, the global infectation, to where everything is so organized, right? That you don't have. It's not just flair players. You don't have kids that learn by themselves.
Mm-hmm. And you know what the funny thing too is we think that by implementing more things, like we need to implement, how can I say this? I think Germany can go too far to where they're like measuring every single metric of a player and everything needs to be dictated to where there's no environment for players just to play. Like it's kind of like trying to create robots.
Yes.
Because we think if we interfere, then we're making better players because we're giving our knowledge to them, but we're not letting players figure things out, get creative.
I agree. I agree.
Yeah.
I think we need to just let players be themselves, what they are, right? The problem with coaching, and I guess to sum this up, right? The problem with soccer in our country, in the USA, is coaches. Not just a generalization, but the problem is usually coaches because we're over coaching, right?
Yeah.
As opposed to like we need an environment where the kids will just play, right? And then to come up to solve, because soccer is a game of solving problems, right? So I'll give you an example. Like when I go to games, right, I learned over the years trying to tell my parents not to coach the kids, right? Now, to say that, it's like most of these parents never played soccer, so I don't know why they're trying to coach the kids in the first place, right?
I know.
But I tell them, parents, I'm not just trying to be rude. The problem is when the game is actually going on, Kevin, they don't even listen to me. And I'm the one that's supposed to know what he's doing, right? I'm not telling them what to do because I want them to solve problems. Because the example is we have a breakaway. One kid is here and everybody's telling them to shoot, right? And I'm telling them, no, don't shoot. find the guy that's wide open. Because if you're coming here to shoot the ball and the keeper is there, he's expecting you to shoot, right? So what do? You play it to him and he has a what?
Open goal.
A tap it. So a lot of times I show my parents that and they see it, right? Because I talk to parents and I'll be like, well, you were telling your kid to shoot the ball, right? But I don't want him to shoot the ball. Ask me why. They were asking me and I was like, okay, when he was there one-on-one with the keeper, George was there. So all he had to do was make the keeper think that he was going to shoot, and then what? Cut it back, and then what does he have? Tap it.
Yeah.
That's decision making. And most people don't see soccer from that level. All they see is because we're so fixated, not just the parents, the coaches, we're so fixated on the score, right? That we're not teaching, we're not pointing to kids. Like, of course you took a shot there and the ball went through the keeper's arm, but the better option was there.
Yeah.
Right? So now once you have the better option, now the keeper is in two minds. Is he going to shoot or is he going to play there?
Correct.
Once they think that, then you got it.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So soccer for me is like, it's just, it's you're in the classroom, right? The kids need to learn, but a lot of that learning, man, is stuff that you just pick up playing. No coach can teach you how to play soccer. They just can't.
That's so funny.
Yeah, I think coaches, we think too much of ourselves. Really thinking that we can, we don't make the. It's a player's game.
It's funny, because, man, and this that's so good because and a guy when on Messi's documentary said this, and some people pointed it out, but on what you said, when you as a coach get a player. And a player turns out to be really good, don't give yourself too much credit because there was another a guy that brought in Messi when he was a kid. He said, "No, I discovered Messi. I didn't make him. I'm not taking any credit. I gave him the environment." But yeah, that's a good point. Coaches, coaches aren't going to say that. We're the problem.
We're not going to say it. But I think it comes with maturity. And the older you get and you start seeing it, and you're like, man. Because at best, man, I don't want, like I tell my kids, man, I don't want you to play like me. I want you to play like you, right? And then so if I tell you what to do, then you're going to be like me, but there's only one me, right? You can be better in your own right.
Yeah,
how do we get you?
100%.
Yeah, you can be a lot better than me.
Yeah.
Right? If I limit you to how I dribble and how I beat people, then your ceiling is here.
And that's why I make a point now. I don't tell a player something until after the play is made. So when he's doing, like, when he has the ball, I don't say, hey, look up or pass it here or you know what I mean? I try, or like, I try to say, okay, let me see what happens.
And then teach them.
Exactly.
No, actually, I did that today 2 times and I completely messed up the kid.
Yeah.
I was trying to tell him, like, hey, he's there. And by the time he looked, it was too late. And I actually apologized to him. Hey, I'm sorry. I shouldn't have said it.
Yeah.
Not that he was going to do that, but I realized once I said something that you just messed him up worse.
Yeah.
So you did, because once the game is going on, Kevin, I think our job as coaches is like, I think all my coaching is done in training. Right? When I get to the game, I should sit there like this and just enjoy.
You know what, Coach Danny?
Yeah.
I talk with I used to, a while ago, not too long ago, I used to be all involved like this. My dad said, hey,
that's normal.
Just, now, like the last few games, I'm just quiet. And then I say very little because a lot of what we say, like you said, they don't even listen to you. It's not necessary. All that yelling, it's not even necessary.
They're not. Their hearts are beating too fast. They're scared. There are people coming. They don't have time.
Yeah.
Our job is to coach and train it and go and enjoy the game.
Yeah.
And see the fruits of our labor.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then go back to practice and just keep working. And eventually, I think you can sit there and just like, man, these guys are playing. As a coach, for me, the most satisfying thing is like when they do stuff that we've worked on. Right?
Oh, yeah.
And I'm looking and going, man, you see how they got out of the back?
Yeah.
They went, and you saw what they were doing. You can just sit there and just enjoy. So I think,
Yeah. But it's good. Anyways, that's it on EvoToca. Stay tuned.